Learning outcomes for this module. On successful completion of this module, you will be able to explain the discrimination, prejudice, and institutionalization that people have experienced and how it impacts on their experience of friendships and community. Define and explain the importance of both friendships and community. Describe ways that can be applied to help people to find and build friendships and community. Explain the importance of and how people can maintain the friendships they have in their lives. Detail the potential challenges that you may face and explain how you can help the people you support to tackle negative and discriminatory attitudes. Chapter 1. History. Summary. People with disabilities have experienced abuse, discrimination, and worse. Often they find they are deprived of ordinary opportunities to be part of community life and to form friendships. However, the people we support can make great citizens and form wonderful friendships and loving partnerships. Featured in this module. This module features presentations from a range of leading professionals and self-advocates, including Dave Hingsberger, Linda Kahn, Margaret Cushion, Steve Diamond, Beth Mount, Dave Hasbury, Patty Scott, and Jack Pierpoint. In the following film, the presenters introduce themselves.
Okay, my name is Dave Hingsberger, and I'm at Vita Community Services, the Director of Clinical and Educational Supports for the organization. I also am in private practice doing lecturing, consulting regarding disability issues. And I've been working with people with disabilities for around 35 to 40 years for all of my adult life.
My name is Linda Kahn, and I live in Toronto, and currently I'm working with Jack Pierpoint and Kathy Hollins at Inclusion Press, and have always been interested, I think, in issues of social justice and people who've been pushed to the margins. And when I moved to Rhode Island, I started working there in the state institution, a place called the Ladd Center, and helped close that institution, and was referred to as Miss Flip Chart and Markers. I did a lot of person-centered planning, and the last 9 years that I lived there, I was the state director for services for adults with disabilities.
Okay, I'm Margaret Cushion, and I'm a clinical psychologist. I used to work in the NHS. 30 years I worked in services for people with learning disabilities around the country as a psychologist within services. Towards the end of my NHS career, I was responsible for psychology services across Devon. So I was involved in overseeing and supervising staff who were providing psychology services across Devon, while at the same time providing a service myself in my own patch. And now I'm retired from the NHS, and I do some work with various organisations providing staff training.
Hi, my name is Steve Diamond. I'm co-chair of Cornwall's Learning Disability Partnership Board. I'm also chair of a charity called Cornwall People First, which is a charity run by 4 people with learning disabilities. I'm also a consultant for Organi Associates.
So I'm Beth Mount, and I've been thinking about person-centered planning and how to build better lives for people with disabilities for about 35 years. And my work started in Georgia and was somewhat connected to the civil rights movement in Georgia. So for me, person-centered planning has always been related to creating the social changing the social situation in the lives of people and really working on change from a civil rights point of view, not just a programmatic one.
I'm Dave Hasbury, and I currently partner with Patty Scott and Neighbors International. But what I've done for the last 30 years is really help groups of people figure out how they can collaborate together to make something happen. And so that's what Patty and I are doing now, is helping both everything from a small group of people around an individual to figure out what can happen, to helping an organization figure out what can happen, to helping governments and systems figure out what they can do to make things happen. So our work together is really trying to help people figure out what's important and what can we do about what's important. And so we kind of design processes and ways of doing that that make that possible. So that's what I'm doing.
Patty Scott is deeply committed to equal opportunity and a world in which all people are included. In 1995, founded Neighbors, Inc., an innovative US agency that affords people with disabilities the opportunity to take control of and direct their own lives and the resources that support them. Over the past 17 years, Neighbors has supported people in New Jersey and Pennsylvania in moving into their own homes, controlling their own supports and resources, and living full, rich lives as contributors in their local communities. Jack Pierpoint is an independent Canadian publisher and catalyst for inclusion, diversity, teamwork, and change. Jointly with his wife and partner, Linda Kahn, Jack conducts workshops, consults with organizations, and collaborates with people with disabilities and their families to engage in positive change that honors the gifts and contributions of all. Earlier, Jack, his late wife Marsha Forrest, and John O'Brien collaborated to create several person-centered approaches, such as Path, Maps, and Circles of Friends. The collaboration continues now with John and Linda. Introduction. Sometimes we take for granted our right to be part of the community, to form friendships, to fall in love, or to be part of a family. The people we support have often experienced a mixture of discrimination, prejudice, and institutionalization, which has deprived them of these basic rights. Today, many people experience institutionalized services, and others have not been supported to form friendships when they were younger. It is important not only to understand the background to these problems, but also to see that these problems can be overcome. As we will see, even people who have been cut off from the community for decades can form friendships and develop a rich and varied life. Attitude. In the 19th century, the people we support were referred to as the feeble-minded and were regarded as a threat to society. It was a common view that people with disabilities were uneducated, unemployable, and a drain on the economy. They were not seen as having any value or worth, or as being able to contribute to society. In general, there was fear that these feeble-minded misfits would have a negative effect on society's gene pool. The practice of eugenics, the proposed improvement of the human species by encouraging or permitting reproduction of only those people with genetic characteristics judged desirable, and also sterilization, was widely adopted by many countries. In Canada, 2,832 sterilizations had been performed before the Sexual Sterilization Act of Alberta was abolished in 1972. Between 1934 and 1976, a total of 62,000 Swedish people were sterilized, 90% of which were women. People in Germany identified as life unworthy of life were sterilized against their will. More than 400,000 people were sterilized, including criminals, the feeble-minded, homosexuals, the idle, and the insane. The building. In the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, People with disabilities were typically housed in large buildings called schools, hospitals, or asylums. The buildings themselves were usually hidden in the countryside, with a sizable amount of landscaped land around them. Some asylums housed over 3,500 people at one time. These buildings were often built in a colony design, which consisted of small groups of wards within the same building, effectively creating isolated communities within those wards. Each building was linked to the others, creating a web-like maze of corridors. Male and female patients had separate wards that could often accommodate 60 or more patients at one time. Patients were guarded by staff at all times to ensure that segregation laws were met. Staff were not usually recruited locally, thus leading the patients to further isolation from their local surroundings. The asylum was considered the community in itself, with the able-bodied male patients working either in gardens or on the farm that was part of the asylum. The women tended to work in the laundry facility or in the kitchen. The patients with difficult behaviors were either locked up in a single padded cell or put into straitjackets. There was a culture of power and control, and people had little or no choice regarding any aspect of their lives. Food, clothing, visits from family and friends, bedtime, everything was dictated by staff, and everyone had the power to reprimand the patients, from the doctor to the handyman. Abuse from staff and other patients was not uncommon, and many patients lived in constant fear. Now, around the world, mental and social health care has changed, and asylums are disappearing as people move into the community. The challenges of today. Today we live in very different times, but we still face many challenges. For example, you can have a lovely house and a change of surroundings, but you can still end up living in a mini institution. Some people have experienced being more isolated than they were before. In the hospital, people had friends. They might have been employed or involved as a team member in the hospital football club. When they moved out and into the community, some lost their identity and the role they played within the system, which was the hospital. Within the confines of the hospital, they were accepted for who they were, physically and mentally. Now, out in the community, many people have to start over from the beginning. People might live in a different area, and friendships could lapse if there is not support to maintain them. Other challenges might include the area to which the person has moved. Through fear or ignorance, neighbors might not like having one of those people living next to them, and others might think that the house should have been allocated to a more suitable candidate who is seen as having a greater input into the community. The community might also have prejudices and thus be less tolerant of people with disabilities who, for example, may take longer to get in and out of elevators or purchase items at the checkout. Furthermore, the person you support may also have wounds and trauma from negative experiences of friendship and community, broken promises, and the continual fear and reality of staff turnover. With this knowledge, you can also think of your role as facilitating a slow healing process. Assumptions about community. We should not make assumptions about what community means for the people we support. In some instances, we have been so keen to run away from anything that resembled the institution and segregation that we neglected to think about or ask what people with disabilities themselves want. In this film, Dave Hingsberger describes the danger of thinking that community for people with disabilities means a community completely without other people who also have disabilities.
I have a great deal of difficulty with how the field of human services has conceptualized community. As I would see conceptualized by middle-class white people, because it's this thing that everybody wants to be part of. But firstly, as a gay man, as a man with a disability, I don't see the community in the same way that most people do. I see the community as a place where I'm in danger. I see the community as a place that rejects. I see the community as a place that is overtly hostile to people who are different. So I don't see this community that everybody's talking about. I do believe in community, and I strongly believe in community, but I believe in community as I think it is really experienced by real people, because I don't think very many of us are ever in that community, that larger overarching community. I believe that most of us belong to a whole bunch of smaller communities into which we feel welcome, and community to which we bring our uniqueness, and our uniqueness is welcome. I mean, clearly I'm in the community, in the gay community, and I'm in the disabled community, but I'm also in smaller communities. I'm in a community of writers because I write, and I socialize with people who do some very similar things to what I do, and we get together and we talk about our writing. And when I look at some of the communities that I belong to, they're the communities, and the very communities that is rejected by these people who believe in the community living movement. People say that I'm self-segregating into the gay community, or self-segregating into the disabled community, which is really a judgment made by somebody who isn't gay and by somebody who isn't disabled. But what I hope for is that people with disabilities are able to experience a maximum number of communities, that they have access to the disabled community. And the disabled community is a really valued resource. And it's a resource which we actively deny to people with intellectual disabilities by saying they shouldn't hang around with other people with disabilities, they shouldn't associate with other people with disabilities, going to activities with other people with disabilities is wrong and segregationist and so forth. I mean, in almost every country that has civil liberties, there's the constitutional right to gather. And I guess that applies to everybody but people with intellectual disabilities, because our philosophy says they shouldn't be together. So to me, our goal really should be asking ourselves the question, how many communities does this person have access to? And I think the difficulty that led us to this desire for the overarching community is that we saw that people with disabilities had really only the access to the community of others with disabilities, and that was foisted upon them by segregation. Okay, so what we determined is that community is wrong. Okay, so we want them in this other community. Well, I don't think that that's really what the answer ever should have been. I think we should have seen that the problem was that they had one community into which they had access. I mean, I don't want to be restricted to the gay community. I don't want to be restricted to the disabled community, but I don't want to be denied access to those either.
Assumptions about friendships. In this film, Dave Hingsberger moves on from the discussion of our assumptions about community to our assumptions about friendship. Dave explains how we have discouraged people with disabilities from being friends with other people who also have disabilities.
There's two things that I think it's really important to talk when we think about the issue of friendship, okay? Firstly, whenever I meet somebody who's talking about, people with disabilities need more friends and all that kind of stuff, they always mean with non-disabled people. That's always the end part of that sentence. And I find that disturbing. I think, why is it that we prefer people with disabilities to have friends with people without disabilities? Okay. So let's just imagine that you or the viewer is Italian. Okay. And there was a time in society where being Italian was a very bad thing. All right. And imagine I came to you and I said, well, then you're Italian and I'm real sorry about that, but you are Italian. And I have to tell you, when you get together with other Italians, we really notice it and it really makes us uncomfortable. So we'd like you to hang out with non-Italians and let their value rub off on you. Now, that is clearly a racist statement. It's what we say to people with disabilities. I mean, we don't want them to be in groups. We don't want them to be, with a bunch of other people with disabilities because it draws attention to them. They're the only minority group which we're absolutely determined cannot be together because it upsets other people. Do you know what I mean? It's just outrageous when you take a look at it in context of minority rights. So part of what I think we've done over the course of time is we've created this incredible loneliness in people with disabilities, because not only have we taught them that, well, the number of people with disabilities I know who say, I don't want to date someone like that, I don't want to hang around with someone like that, and the like that is another person with a disability, that's extraordinarily high. I run into that all the time. So they've become disenfranchised from one another. And in doing so, they become disenfranchised from themselves. That they've lost a relationship, the primary relationship that we have in our lives is the one we have with ourselves. And now I work with people with intellectual disabilities who are so divorced from themselves, so divorced from who they are. They can't identify as a person with a disability. They get extremely upset if they're referred to as a person with a disability. They don't want that identity. They eschew that identity. And as a result, they've built a self-esteem around a falsehood. I'm like everybody else. Well, no, they're not. No, they're not. People with intellectual disabilities are not like everybody else. Gay people are not like everybody else, and women are not like everybody else. I mean, people are who they are, and who they are is important, and who they are means something, and they have to understand what that means.
Chapter 2. The Value of Friendships and Community. Community defined. Most people think of a community as a place or setting, the suburb or city they live in, for example. Communities are much more than that. They are the very essence of how we live and socialize with others. We have our own personal communities, the communities we are a part of, and the communities we associate with. Communities are the building blocks that allow us to make sense of the world we live and participate in, and to share experiences. They provide a sense of identity and purpose, a sense of being a part of and belonging. The value of community membership is not something that most of us think about in any great detail. However, if we look closely at the positive impact it has on our lives, we can see that it has great influence over our thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and friendships through the different roles we embrace in our community. Not only does it have an impact on us, but it also has an impact on how others view us in terms of the positive contributions that we make to others and the community itself. In this film, Linda Kahn helps to further define community.
Got a little ahead of it.
Really think about more than a place. I think about the way that people are connected in relationship with one another. And so I think about networks and associations and common interests. And I think the importance of that actually has to do with valuing the contribution of everyone and believing that everyone has a gift and contribution to make, and that people experience belonging rather than isolation. And it also makes me think about citizenship, which I think is probably the most powerful frame for thinking about person-centered ways of working, which I think actually are about social change and discovering the way that people really want to live together in community life, valuing one another and making a space for everyone.
The importance of community. In this film, Margaret Cushion talks about community as a place where we belong and a place that adds meaning to our lives.
Two people can live in the same place, work for the same organisation, have the same interests, but their communities never overlap. My sense of community, living in a small town, is very different to other people's sense of community, living in the same small town. So it's really important to think about, for you, what makes your sense of community and what does that mean? What does community mean? For most of us, it means a sense of belonging. Where do we belong? What makes us feel like we belong? And how do we belong? What do we do that shows we belong? We make assumptions about the people we work with quite often because they live in a certain place. They're part of that community. But in reality, if you sit and think with someone about their community and talk to them about their community, you might discover that their sense of belonging actually rests, for example, with their family, and their family are hundreds of miles away from where they belong. It rests with their friends, the people they knew when they were growing up and at school, and those people are hundreds of miles away. Their sense of community rests where they live and are supported, but the people who work with them change regularly. So although the physical place is important, the people aren't because they go away. Your and my sense of community comes from being engaged in relationships, being engaged in activities that give meaning to our lives. Community gives us meaning.
Friendship defined. A true friend survives the trials and tribulations of time and remains unconditional. Friendship is a unique blend of affection, loyalty, love, respect, trust, and of course, fun. Similar interests, mutual respect, and strong attachment with each other are what friends share. Friendship is a feeling of comfort and emotional safety with a person. It is when you do not have to weigh your thoughts and measure your words. Friends share the good times and help you through the worst. Friendship is eternal. In this film, the People First self-advocate Steve Diamond talks about what friendship means to him and why it is important.
Having friends you can trust is really important, because if you can't trust them, they're not really your true friends. I've got a close sort of friendship with some people who I really do trust, and I trust my life. I trust my life with them because I've been with them for so long, and they've always stood by me no matter what. So that's what it's all about, really. It's important for me to have friends because without friends, you haven't got anyone else who you can rely on or who you can sort of phone if you're in trouble. It's just, it's a good feeling, really, to know that you have somebody and some people there that if you need them, they're there, and vice versa. If they need you, you're there for them as well. And it's all about sharing experiences and sharing different things between each other.
The importance of friendships. Take a second to think about how important friends are in your own life. Then, as a support staff person, you will have no difficulty in understanding how important it is to help people, however you can, to maximize their opportunities to develop friendships. You can't force it to happen, but you can help things along the way. In this film, Beth Mount highlights the importance of friendships by explaining the meaning behind her well-known quote, "Loneliness is the only disability."
Thinking about the loneliness is the only disability quote in reference to some recent scandals, for example, both in America and in England, where the people who are the subjects of these scandals are the most abandoned people in society, right? They are people who have been disconnected and they're in very institutional or isolated settings. And in light of that level of disconnection, really horrible things happen to people. And so I think we see the contrast is that the more that we build wide, deep, and sustaining relationships all the way around, the richer and the more fulfilling people's lives are. And as one self-advocate said to me recently, you know, when we have a lot of great relationships in our lives, our disability doesn't own us anymore. It's just a part of who we are. And so I think the disability side of people, it's not like it goes away, but in reference to a larger sense of being in the world through all these relationships, it just becomes a much smaller part of who people are.
5 basic tasks. Being an active member of your community and having friendships can bring much richness to our lives and the lives of others. It can be the key to our ongoing education and the exploration of new skills, hobbies, and activities. It can help us find our identity and raise our feelings of self-worth. A good way of thinking about your role is to see it as something you do to help the people you support be full citizens. To help people acquire citizenship, we need to master the 5 basic tasks of good support, as developed by John O'Brien in 1986. They continue to be a powerful and useful way of thinking about good support. They are relevant because too many of the people we support still remain socially isolated and dependent upon services, and consequently, they do not take up their proper place as full and valued citizens. The 5 basic tasks are: 1. Discover gifts and interest. Help people express their unique gifts. 2. Create opportunities in community. Help people share their gifts with the community. 3. Make real connections. Help people build meaningful relationships. 4. Assist and teach. Help people be active in their communities. 5. Safeguard. Keep people safe from harm and abuse. The best supporters know they are not the center of things. Instead, they work to help the people they support take control of their own lives as active members of the community, as full citizens. Community and friendships bring safety. Many of the people we support are more vulnerable than others because they have experienced reduced opportunities to develop friendships and become known members of their community. Wide-ranging friendships and relationships in the community bring safety. When others know of you or care about you, they can help and guide you through difficult times or situations. In this film, Dave Hingsberger uses his own experience to tell a personal story that further illustrates this point.
Probably about a year after I had the power wheelchair. And I love my power wheelchair. And part of the reason I like my power wheelchair so much is that it gives me complete and total independence. I don't need anybody with me. I can go wherever I want, do whatever I need to do, and so forth. I mean, given accessible places to be, of course. So Joe had asked me if I'd go over to the bank machine to pick up some money. And this was on a Sunday, and the bank machine is located where in the mall downtown, where there's a big food court that's closed on Sunday. Okay, so there's no one there, but I didn't think about it. I just went in and I went at the bank machine, and I noticed that there was a gang of maybe 4 to 6 youngish, teen, thuggish kind of boys. You know, and I noticed them notice me taking money out of the machine. Okay, so I put my money into my pocket and I wasn't going to show panic or anything like that. I was just rolling, you know, and it's a long roll in my power chair. And I noticed that they're now following me. Okay, and I'm like, oh my God. So then I speed up, and so do they. Okay, well, for me to get out of there, I've got to get into the elevator and go up a floor where there's lots of people and so forth. So I get to the elevator, and I thought that I'd gotten there way before they were going to get there because I went at top speed to the elevator. So I push, and of course it's not there. You know, I got to wait for it to come. And by the time I'm still waiting, they're now surrounded me. Okay, and they're clearly getting on with me. And I think, I am in real danger here. I am really in danger here. And then the door of the elevator opened, and there on the elevator was the guy who runs the tea shop, where I have tea on a really regular basis. I don't even know his name. Okay. So I was just so relieved to see him, and he was clearly stepping off. He quickly took in the situation. and he said, I forgot something in the store. I said, I'll ride back up with you. So that, and then they just and went away, and we went upstairs, and he went his way and I went my way. And I think my life was saved by a guy whose name I didn't know, but that I had this kind of social contact and social contract with. Do you know what I mean? I go to his tea shop at least twice a week, and he makes tea, and he makes the best tea. And I don't even know that we've had a conversation that's lasted more than 2 minutes, but we have still that odd kind of relationship that you make with people in the community when they see you there, you know. So I really thought that was a really good example of helping. I think when we talk about the kinds of relationships that people have in the community, we're focused on like the more in-depth relationships that people have. But I mean the relationship that you create just by being seen, you know, in the same store, and being noticed, and saying hello and being friendly to the clerk every time that you go out. I think that creates kind of a social contract that if that clerk then saw somebody being taken advantage of or somebody in a situation of danger, there's going to be a sense of personal responsibility to do something about that. That kind of, I think that's one of the benefits of people with disabilities accessing their community and being known in their community and going out into their community, then where bus drivers get to know them, where the ticket taker at the movie theater gets to know them, and so forth. I think your social safety increases in a huge manner in that way. And I don't think we credit that the way that we should in terms of what it is that we're attempting to do to keep people safe when we're talking about safety in the larger community itself.
Another kind of safety. There is also another kind of safety that friendships and community bring, and that is to avoid being entirely dependent on paid support. This is important, as Jack Pierpoint explains in this film, because in our field of work, where budgets are often reduced and staff turnover is high, it is not safe for people to be entirely dependent on the paid support you and your team deliver, no matter how good it may be.
I think we're coming into some very interesting and challenging economic times. And so I think as a support worker, it's really important for you not to create dependency. I don't think it's safe for you, and I certainly don't think it's safe for people you support. So I think a key role is to expand the network of support, build the circle of friends, engage people in the community, doing things with other people, because that is not dependent on somebody else's budget to the same degree, and other people will create safety. And just at that level. So I think an absolutely critical role is to get out there, engage with other people, making relationships, creating friendships as best you can, so that nobody is left alone. Nobody's left alone, period.
What it means to you. On this page is a film that explains the people and places that make a good life for me. Now let's discover what makes a good life for you. Click on your My Notes button below to make a note of your answer to this question. What people and places make a good life for you? What makes a good life for me is likely to be very different to what makes a good life for you. Although we have attempted to define and describe community and friendships in this chapter, both of these terms can mean different things to different people. Identifying what's important to you and why can help you better assist the people you support. Chapter 3. Finding and Building Community. Introduction. This chapter will focus on how you can help people to find and build their presence in their community. Before you work on this, it is critical that you have an intimate knowledge of the people you are supporting, their capacities, and their dreams for the future. Our module, Person-Centered Approaches, Thinking and Planning, offers a range of strategies that can be used to develop your understanding of who is this person. You will need to know what the person's dreams are in order to be able to move on from what currently is and towards what could be. This chapter will use your understanding of the person's interests, strengths, gifts, and dreams to help you explore ways to discover and develop the rich resources and connections that are hidden in every community. Being in versus being of the community. There is a big difference between being in the community and being of the community. I have always been interested in folk music, and when I started working with a man called Tim who shared my interest, I supported him to attend a local folk music group that I knew. The fact that Tim had a genuine love of this type of music made it easy for him to join the group. People could see and would comment favorably on how he would jump up and down in his wheelchair, sing his version of singing, and clap. He made people smile and warm to him as they shared the same enthusiasm for the music. He sometimes made loud noises in quiet times, talked when we were supposed to be listening, or waved to someone across the room during a very somber song. But it was okay. He was a kindred spirit. If we analyze why this particular connection was such a success, it is clear that if great care had not been taken to find out what gave Tim a buzz in depth planning, if his support staff just took him along to things that they were interested in, he would not have had the same enthusiastic reaction. He would not have expressed it to other members, and there would have been less chance of him being accepted into the group. There is no point just being in the community. You have to take part to be of the community. One of the best things that happened was when a couple invited him to their house for coffee, which was a great success. He returned the invitation to his house, and a firm friendship began. Not only did this friendship give Tim company, but he also gained many new skills. He began to take an interest in different types of food as he started to mix with other people. He also developed much better communication skills and had a fuller range of topics to discuss due to being in different people's company. The benefits to him were immense. The group also gained from him. He was a passionate and supporting member of the club and friend to many. What is in the community? Most communities are buzzing with activities we have never heard about. Our knowledge of our own community is usually limited to the particular hobby or activity that interests us, and we do not normally have reason to explore what else there is to offer. To get to know what is going on in our communities, we need to find out more about what we already know is there, and then gather further information of other opportunities that are available. How to gather this information and how to initiate an introduction have to be carefully planned in order to assist an encouraging outcome. Community mapping. Community mapping is a practical activity that can help to yield information on all the people, places, activities, and resources that are present in the person's community. The map reveals the strengths, assets, and opportunities in that community, which can in turn help people to grow their level of engagement and friendships. The following page will discuss how to map in more detail. The people we support usually live in a bubble of specialist services. They often live, travel, work, and spend their leisure time with paid workers and other disabled people. A community map helps to take a step outside of the world of services. In this film, Beth Mount describes how she feels it is important to know as much about the community as we do about the person. Beth also begins to explore the many ways of gaining and recording this information.
To explore the question of what can people contribute to their communities, we have to know the community inside and out. And one of the most important contributions of personal futures planning, in my experience, is that it invites people into a very strong and close discovery of the neighborhoods that people are in and the larger community as well. So We go into a person's community as an explorer, as someone who's there to discover what are the assets of this place and what needs to be done here. What do people need help with? Where are the opportunities to contribute? What do local people feel interested in and invested in? What are the associations? What are the places? What is the culture of a neighborhood and a wider community? And in my experience, what we learn about the community can tell us as much or more about what's possible for a person as person-centered planning can help us understand by just listening to and focusing on the person. In other words, I think when we're looking for capacities in both the person and community, sometimes there's been way too much emphasis on the capacities in the person, and we have not learned anything about the community. So, for example, in a lot of the work that I engage people in, we send people out with cameras to do a photo essay of the community that people are in, to really learn about what's there. We say, you know, put on your walking shoes, take your umbrella if you need to. Actually, don't take your umbrella. Go out on a sunny day, but go explore. Take a notepad, take a camera, talk to people, interview people, find out what is here in this neighborhood, in this place, and how might that be a world that someone with a disability can really connect to and bring something in, offer something. We can't honor the spirit of person-centered planning without knowing deeply what is in the community and what the opportunities are there.
Put on your walking boots. As Beth said in the last film, put on your walking boots and explore the community with the person you support. Visit local churches, stores, and the library. Buy the local paper, view websites, pick up free newsletters, and as you do so, aim to find answers to these questions. Where is the heart of the community or the central place to be, and what is there? What is the culture of the neighborhood? What are the main attractions, stores, entertainment, and services? What are the assets of this community? What do people need help with? Where can we contribute? What and where are the public places people like to go to? Library, community centre, etc. What is going on? What facilities or other special places are there? Beyond just attending these places, can someone work or volunteer there? What interests the person I support? Community Guide. Another way to build your knowledge of the community is to identify someone who is a natural connector. We refer to this person as a community guide or bridge builder. Community guides are naturally outgoing, sociable, and good at sourcing information and retaining it. They normally have very good communication skills and are not afraid to ask questions. They are good at linking people to the community. These people do not need to be locals to perform well because they will not hesitate to ask questions, call, and meet new people. There are usually people in the community who, if you ask others, who can help me to find out about such and such, the reply will be, oh, ask Mrs. Brown. She knows everything that is going on, and if she doesn't, she'll find out for you. These people are always well connected and take an interest in what's going on. Some people call it being nosy. They also usually take part in many things in the community. All communities have a Mr. or Mrs. Brown. Our Mrs. Brown is a member of the church, is a justice of the peace, breeds dogs, runs a youth club, and is renowned for her fabulous steak pie.
That we all know a Mr. or Mrs. Brown in our neighborhoods, right?
Bring something of value. It is important to think about how the strengths and gifts of the person you support can be incorporated into a plan so they can bring something of value. In this film, Patty Scott tells a story that further expresses the importance of using the person's capacities and bringing value.
There's two general ways that I've seen that we've supported people, and then a million variations on those, but that we've supported people to really develop relationships in their life. One is to help people figure out what their gifts, passions, talents, interests are, and figure out where they can share those gifts, passions, talents, and interests. So it's not going to the mall once a week, but it's stuff like Joy, who I mentioned earlier, who likes to help people and has a bubbly personality and remembers people's names, finding her a job volunteering at a soup kitchen in an inner city neighborhood. And not only did she just dish up the soup or the food or whatever they were serving, but the people who come in there each day, people who were living on the streets or living in shelters and separated from their family, she remembered the name of every single last person. And they would walk in and she'd run up and she'd give them a hug and she'd say, "Hi, how are you? I missed you." And if she just saw you yesterday, she'd still tell you that she missed you. And she'd tell people by name and she'd make people feel important. So Joy was a valued member of that place. And she would volunteer there a couple times a week. And after the first couple of years, she won a Volunteer of the Year award. And by being part of that and being there on a regular basis, but not being a part in just a way that she's kind of sitting there, but being a part in that she brought something of tremendous value, of such value that she got the Volunteer of the Year award. She developed relationships. So helping people find where they can share their gifts in a way with other people who either share those interests or will welcome those gifts, and then do that over time, over and over and over again, is one of the ways that we've supported people to develop relationships. And quite frankly, it's how I've developed relationships in my life. And a soup kitchen is one example, but it might be going to church. It might be taking a class at doing something that you love. It might be pursuing music, whatever it is, where you're bringing something of value and sharing that with other people who are also bringing something of value.
Okay. What happened? Oh, there.
Doing your research. Once you have identified where the person you support would like to become involved, think about whether or not you are the right person to support this activity or interest. You cannot be all things to all people, and if, for example, the sports bar is a place you would normally avoid, find out who could better support this interest. It may be useful to go and check out the place first before becoming a member. Go along and take note of how you are welcomed. Was it friendly, or did it feel that there might be a clique? Were you given information about club nights? Was information given freely? Were you invited to sit with anyone, or were you left on your own? All these things can give you a good idea of what it would be like to join on a permanent basis. It is also quite important to find out the culture of the group. Are there any particular things people do or prepare for each week? Do people take it in turns to man the coffee bar? Or do people have particular seats that they sit in every week? What is the dress code? How much does it cost? What are the facilities like? If the person uses a wheelchair, is the building accessible to them? Do they have a disabled toilet? Then, before you go with the person you support, have a conversation with them and review all of the above. In this film, Patty Scott talks about the significance of a good introduction to forming a positive relationship and tells a story that illustrates how someone repaired a relationship that was not off on a positive start.
A third thing that we think about a whole lot is how we introduce people to places, so that they will be seen as someone who brings something of value to wherever they're going. I mean, some people like Tyrone, he just kind of rolls through the door and he's making offers, and his gifts are pretty evident and apparent. And there's other people who go to places who are maybe not seen as someone that those people want there. For instance, there was a woman in California I spent some time with who had moved from an institution. She lived right across the street from a library. They knew her in the library. She would go to the library. She would disrupt the library incredibly. They didn't really want her to be at the library, but she loved the library. So we thought about how do we reintroduce her to the library in a way that people would see her differently. And they helped her make some cookies. And she took the cookies across the street to the library, and she didn't use words a whole lot. So somebody helped her out with this. But she brought the cookies to the librarians and thanked them and said, since I moved here, and it only been a couple of months, I've been, I've been really enjoying your library. And I want to thank you for that, and introduced herself by name. And like I said, she had help to do that. But what they did was start to change the perception of who she was with the librarian. So thinking about how you make that introduction of the person to the place. And they started to see her, and it didn't happen in one time, but they started to see her instead of as the person who's coming in and disrupting the library and scaring the little children. They saw her as the woman who brought cookies, who took the time to make the cookies and bring the cookies, and who appreciated what they were offering in the library. And they started to think about her a little bit differently. And so we also think about how to help people get introduced to places in a way where they're going to be seen in the way we see them, which is as someone who brings a gift.
First steps. As you take the first steps into a new setting, it is extremely important to pay attention to how you introduce the person you support. Remember that you are there to support them. Practical gestures can be used to reinforce this. For example, if someone tries to talk to you and asks you about the individual you are supporting, attempt to redirect them to the person. Think about how you position yourself. Make sure that you are not in front of the person and blocking conversation. Always involve the person and direct the conversation to them. If the person is in a wheelchair, try to get to the same level as them to talk to them. Do not tower over the person. As Patty Scott underlines in this film, making introductions to new opportunities is highly reliant on a trusted relationship between you and the person you support, and your ability to keep the focus on them. Patty goes on to tell a story as an example of a gentle and thoughtful approach to introducing new interests when the person you support is less certain.
One is having a relationship of trust with someone where the person trusts you and feels safe with you and is willing to explore things with you. And that doesn't come by walking in the door and saying, let's try this. It comes by listening to people, by meeting them where they're at, by spending time trying to develop a relationship with them. And once that happens, people are often willing to try things that they may not have been willing to try before. Something else is, I think a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, maybe sometimes, those of us who do the work get ideas in our head about what it is someone might really want to do or what would be good for them. So sometimes we're kind of imposing our own ideas of what someone might want to try. I think if we can really figure out how to listen to people and what they're passionate about and let them try what they're passionate about, even if it's something just as simple as go out for a cup of coffee and start with what they want to start with and then help them expand on that. And the third, I think back to this woman from California again. When I met with the group of staff who were working with her, they had an inkling that she might enjoy being part of the local church. And that was maybe half a block away. She didn't share that inkling when they put the idea out to her. And they had thoughts that it might be because the idea of going to church on Sunday with all those cars was just really overwhelming to her. So what they explored with her, and she was willing to try, was going down during the week when the church was empty and meeting the pastor and just saying hello. And she likes to help out and at the church. And I don't go to church, so I don't know that much about churches, but they evidently have programs that they fold that they pass out to the parishioners on Sunday. And they had suggested to her that maybe she could help with the folding of the program. So the plan for her was there was someone who was actually a member of that church who was part of that group there, was going to walk down with her, was going to talk to the minister first. She was just going to stop by and say hello. She does love coffee. Coffee was going to be a part of that journey out. And they were going to take home a few programs to fold and see if she was into doing that. So it's thinking about doing it in a way that is comfortable to the person. Now, the long-term goal was thinking, okay, so you take them home and you fold them and you bring them back to the pastor, and the pastor thanks you and you're doing something of value. And if you like it, you can do it again. And, there might be a time when she's actually ready to go to church on Sunday or go to a smaller gathering at the church. And by the time she actually shows up at the church and starts participating in something, she will be the woman who's been helping them with their programs for a couple months, and she'd come in with a valued role there. So that was more about helping her think about, is there a way that you might want to check this out that feels safe and comfortable for you? So, and I guess the final thing on this is I don't think there's any one answer. I think if people trust you, they're willing to explore a lot of stuff with you. If you really listen to people, you'll help them explore stuff that's really of interest to them and not to you. And if you try and figure out ways to support people to be successful with their exploration, they're more likely to do it. That's one other thought. Joy, when she was volunteering at the soup kitchen, that was like place number 10 we found for her volunteer work. Places 1 through 9, all of which we thought would be brilliant opportunities for her, didn't work for one reason or another. So part of it is not being afraid to keep trying if the person's willing to keep taking the journey with you. And Joy was someone who's willing to keep taking the journey.
Third places. Ray Oldenburg is the sociologist who understood the importance of informal gathering places. From this understanding, he came up with the concept of third places. The first place is your home. The second is your place of work. The third place is somewhere in the community, like a social club, church, leisure centre, etc. The connection with others is built by going to third places regularly at regular times. For example, if you go to the local cafe once or twice, you will see people, but you will not get to know each other, and the people are unlikely to want to strike up a conversation. But if you start going every Wednesday and Friday night, people will get to know you. You will be a regular, and you can build a rapport with others. If I think of all the places and situations I have been in where I have made friends, it has been when I am doing something regularly. For example, I walk my dog every night with a friend. We have been doing this now for over 12 years, and it all started when my dog was a puppy. I was training him in the local park. I went there every day, at the same time, the same place, and practiced. One day, a lady who I had noticed running every morning came over and asked if my dog was a bearded collie. We started chatting. She had just lost her old dog, which was of the same breed, but apparently still had another old dog back at home. She said that her husband would love to see my pup and said that she would bring him along one day. We met one morning shortly after this, and we got on really well. We introduced his old dog to my pup, and that was the start of regular dog walks together. We now have the keys to each other's houses and help out when needed. Our shared interest and regular meetings fostered the makings of a long and lasting friendship. The graphic on this page takes you through the concept of third places.
I guess I could have been reading those. Be easier if I did. So if the person needs support to go to these places, think about who could go with them, who has the same interest, who is the person most comfortable with. Show up and be present. Go to those places again and again.
Third places. The great thing about third places is that some of the best relationships and community connections can happen with very little effort from you or the person you are supporting. Great friendships can develop quite naturally from just being there without the need for lots of professional support or involvement. In this film, Dave Hasbury talks about the importance of third places, contribution, your own role, and the value of learning from the experience of showing up.
Well, I'm obviously pretty biased because a lot of my professional life has been devoted to helping people see what they really want to create and then creating it. So that's the reason that I've learned how to do graphic recording and graphic facilitation, was to help people really start to imagine and see what they would like. And so I think that that's a really critical starting place, is the listening to who somebody is and what would that person want to see in their life. What's important to them? What do they love? What do they feel good about? What do they enjoy? What makes them happy? And how can we figure out how they can find places where that's what they're looking at? So when you're starting from kind of isolation, which is sadly the case for a whole bunch of people, they couldn't tell you who they know. They only know the people that they see when they go to the program, or they live at the group home, or that's who they know. So listening to that is really an important starting place, and actually visualizing it, imagining it, seeing it, and then imagining where are all the places in the world where people who are interested and care about these kinds of things go. Because I think one of the things that's really critical is you got to show up. You're never going to establish a relationship if you don't show up. So that's really critical, is finding out where's a place that's good to go show up. The second part that's really important in that is how you show up. So helping people to think about that. And that might mean helping people to learn a little bit about what those places are all about, what the culture of the sports bar is all about, what the culture of the church community is all about, what's the culture of the local ice rink, or wherever it is that people decide to go, helping people to understand, this is what happens there. And that's a place that sometimes staff people can play a really important part in introducing people to parts of the world that maybe they haven't had the chance to be there before. So finding out how to show up. And for me, the big part about that is the showing up from a place of strength and a place of value. So when I go there, one of my intentions is to bring something good. And that's a really critical thing to help people think about that. To think about it ahead of time so they can know what they're actually going to bring. And then learning really quickly. That master failure faster stuff is like, go and try it out and see what happens when you show up. And who do you meet and how did it go and all that. So the other part that goes with that showing up and how you show up is really learning from that. So you can actually make room to kind of talk about, geez, how did that go? And I think that two parts of that is, one part is just doing that kind of debriefing and learning with whoever I went to that place with. Because I think when you're starting to get to engage in the community, not going alone is really an important thing. That you have somebody you go with, and whether that's a staff person or it's a friend or a family member or whatever. So doing that initial learning with that person, just kind of on your way home or the next time you see each other, just kind of talking about how did it go? What would I like to try next time I go? What would I do differently? Those kinds of things. And then the last part that I would say is, who else do we know that cares about the things that I care about? Cares as an interest in the things that I am interested in? Who do I know? Who do I know as a person myself? Who do my staff person know? Who do the members of my support circle know? So like starting to think about people that we already have some connection to, and how can we introduce you to those people? And again, I would put it in the context that it's all about learning. So go out and try stuff and see what you learn from that, and kind of gradually build that kind of thing. But the part about it that's really critical is you can't just go once. You have to kind of keep showing up. You have to keep going back. You have to, and the interesting thing is if you keep doing that, you'll start to become known. And then the only question left to you is, how do you want to be known when you show up in those places? And that's what, again, all the people in your life can help you with. They can help you think about it. Well, if that's what you want to be known as, well, what could you do that would help you to do that? So I really see a huge amount of the work that all of us have, the individual themselves, the people they hire to work for them, their support circle, is really about learning. How do we, just continue to keep learning and growing so that the ultimate outcome is that we're actually bringing value to the places that we go to and show up. And along the way, collecting people that we have some resonance with, some kind of connection with along the way, and finding ways for people to do that.
Contributing to the community. There are many ways people can contribute to their community. A few years ago, I was working with a young gentleman who was blind. His support staff were struggling to find things he was interested in. The problem was compounded by the fact that he chose not to speak to anyone except, on occasion, to his mother. As I got to know him over the weeks, I noted that the one thing he loved to do was to thread sewing reels, bobbins, onto a string. This gave me an idea. Would this man be interested in making jewelry? He was, and with the help of his support team, he decided to give it a try. From the beginning to the end of this process, this young man took on many valued social roles, including a student, a member, an entrepreneur, a businessman, and a friend. He was seen as someone who had a talent and a gift that he could share. His newfound community was not on his doorstep, but only a few miles away. The film on this page illustrates the process we took. Employment and contribution. Often a neglected opportunity for the people we support is the valued role of employment. Employment means earning a paycheck and receiving money, which, in turn, provides us with a way to control and take responsibility for our lives. But employment is about much more than just making money. It is central to citizenship and a great way to make friends, be productive, and contribute to our society. In this film, Jack Pierpoint tells an inspiring story about a man who was experiencing a lot of anger and frustration. After some careful planning, he was supported to find a paying job in the community that added meaning and purpose to his life.
We were in a lovely planning meeting, a young man who had a staggering amount of energy. Couldn't get him to slow down very much, but he's fascinated by food. And so he's got a fellow who really wonderful worker who comes by, and they're having trouble figuring out how to use up his energy and find some kind of work-ish engagement that's going to be meaningful. And they begin to think, he loves going shopping, loves food. What if they became a little shopping business, a small enterprise? Because there's lots of people in the neighborhood, his neighborhood, who they're a little older, a little this, a little that, but need a hand. And so it was like days. They had knocked on a few doors and started to build up a little roster of errands they were going to do. commercial enterprise that's going to make a lot of money. We're not talking about that, but networked into the community, doing really valuable stuff for all kinds of people that create safety and comfort for a lot of people, busy, and no money, no new money. We were already paying for the services that were already there, but suddenly it had a purpose and a reason and was taking off. And sometimes, not too surprising, that turns into paid work.
But nothing happens here. In this film, Margaret Cushion explores the problem of a neighborhood where nothing happens and provides another positive example of how a lady created her own small contribution to her neighborhood, which built relationships and also served to support her own passion.
Quite often people will say, but nothing happens in our neighborhood. Nothing happens in our neighborhood. It's dead. It's kind of full of people who go to work every day and come back and live here, or elderly people. Well, I don't believe that nothing happens in your community. I think if you search, you'll find lots of things that happen. It's about the secret of community engagement and helping people get involved in their neighborhood is about thinking creatively. What are the things that are going on, and how can the person I'm working with in some way get involved in those things? And if there is nothing happening in your neighborhood after you've done the research, how can we create something? Because you can be sure that the person you're supporting is not the only individual who wants things to happen in their neighborhood. And there's a lovely example of a woman who lived in a cul-de-sac, and she was surrounded by houses with mainly elderly, retired people, and wanted to engage in her community. And she'd say hello to her neighbours, and they got to know what she looked like. And she was interested in magazines and photographs and pictures and looking at magazines, and would buy new magazines, but hadn't got enough money to buy lots of magazines. And between her and her support worker, they came up with this idea of regularly going around, so once a week, once a fortnight, going around the local houses with a big trolley and collecting up people's magazines and then taking them to the neighbour and offering magazines. So she was getting magazines to look at herself, but she was also giving her neighbours an opportunity to share their magazines in a way that they hadn't done before. It was a simple thing, but it had huge spin-offs for her in that she was providing a service that the mainly women in the local community appreciated, but wouldn't have asked their neighbour, have you got new magazines that you've read that I could have a look at? They wouldn't have done it. But because she was doing it, they were able to access magazines that other people had read. And they got to know her, and they got to know one another as well, because they gradually began to invite her in for a cup of tea, and she would talk about the lady next door who always read this magazine, and gradually over time, the neighbourhood became more cohesive, the individuals within it more known to one another as a result of what this woman did, a simple, regular, routine service that she provided, which had implications in terms of payback for her. She got to see more magazines without having to buy them, and she got to know her neighbours, and they got to know one another. So it was a win-win in every direction. Now, who had the idea? Yeah, I don't know. I think it was the support worker who had the idea. But it was a risky thing to do for this woman to go knocking on her neighbours' doors saying, I'm going to set up a magazine lending library. Would you be interested? They had to think carefully about how they would do it. They had to think carefully about how people would receive the message and what to do when people said no, because there were people who did say no. Yeah, they weren't interested, didn't want to participate. But among the people who did, she was able to build up something over time. And it's doing small things like that can grow and have huge implications for people's lives in terms of the quality of their life and their sense of doing something useful for others and their sense of having their own needs met, both for the things that they want and the social contacts that they want.
Final thoughts. To conclude this chapter, here are some final thoughts about finding and building community. It may sound obvious, but it pays to be polite, especially when in new company. This sets the tone of respect for the person you support, and if others see that you are respectful, they in turn will usually reciprocate. Respect works both ways. Time spent supporting the individual to polish up their social skills and good manners can go a long way. Each day, at the time when you are about to start supporting someone, take a minute to explain what the expectations may be and to review your plans. Ultimately, our goal is to demonstrate the real and positive presence and contribution that we know the people we support can make. In this short film, Beth Mount explains one way of knowing when people truly belong to their community.
Wherever you are, whoever you are, what does it look like to be an ally and to support someone with a disability to become more of a member? So the mark of that is almost always when people are not there, when they don't show up in the regular way that they become accustomed to showing up, do people notice and ask about them? Do we worry about folks? Do we say, where you been? You know, what happened to you? We've missed you. So belonging, when people really belong, they have established a place. And when they're not in their place in the life of the community, they're deeply missed and people are concerned about them. Then we know we've done something that's really made a difference for people.
All right. Guess where that puts us? At the halfway point. All right. 10:35. So 10:50. And we will resume and finish off the last half of it. All right.
Chapter 4. Finding and Building Friendships. Introduction. Loneliness may be a consequence of a lack of opportunities and skills to learn how to be a social being. This chapter introduces some approaches and strategies you can use to help people find and build friendships. This film with Beth Mount summarizes the need to think about the importance of contribution and shared interests. It also reminds us that friendships do not happen by chance, that they can be hard work and need a lot of ongoing effort.
Well, you know, there's absolutely no magic answer to what it is to develop real relationships. I think we all struggle with that every day of our lives. I mean, relationships are complicated, messy, confusing, and hard. Now, that said, many people with disabilities have a number of relationships and really important ones. And we have a long pattern of disconnecting people from their natural communities and their natural relationships in order to relocate them into artificial settings where then we go work on their relationships. So fortunately, one of the things that is happening at this point in time is I do believe we're getting better at supporting people in their families and in their neighborhoods and building and strengthening the fabric that they come into the world surrounded by, rather than taking them out of that. Now, that said, that's not enough. So one reason we work so hard on real contribution, especially work, is it's really through shared interest and shared meaning and shared effort to bring something into community that people find themselves surrounded by others, and we have even more opportunities to grow relationships. So I think of the challenge of relationship building as a gardener might think about one's garden, right? It's a lot of work, and it has a lot to do with, well, what environment are we in? What are the seeds of potential? What are the conditions, around us? What is the weather like, and how much does the sun shine, and how fertile is the dirt, and how can we make it even more so? And how, as much as anything, how can we tend to this garden in order to see the potential in it grow? And so relationships are like that. They don't happen through magic. It's an enormous amount of nurturing and tending, and then harvesting and strengthening and supporting people to see the gifts in particular that people with disabilities bring.
Natural support. As we explore friendships within this chapter, we are primarily referring to unpaid supports. These are often known as natural supports. The people we work with often have very few and sometimes no friends who are not paid to work with them. Natural supports are an essential part of community life. Your role is to nurture, create, encourage, and rebuild the natural supports that people already have or can acquire. Natural supports rarely pre-exist. If the person had the support they needed to live a good life, they would be living a good life. Therefore, we must harvest, build, and strengthen all forms of natural supports. This takes a lot of care and attention, and there is no magic answer. This part of your job is a form of art and requires you to be very creative and person-centered. Of course, paid supports are a piece of the puzzle, but they are not the answer to everything. Discovering people. We all have people in our lives who provide us with natural support. Finding out who is in the life of the person you support may require some investigative work. Start by spending time with the person, talk with them, and speak with their family and friends. A useful technique to identify people is illustrated by the graphic on this page. Help the person to write down all the places that they are familiar with. Write the names of the different people they know there, and then describe the friendship they have with those people. Using a circle of friends. A great tool that is often used in our field of work to help find, build, and make the most of friendships and relationships is a circle of friends, as detailed in our module, Person-Centered Approaches, Thinking and Planning. A circle of friends, sometimes also referred to as a circle of support or a network, is a term used to describe the action of assembling a group of people together to give friendship and help by focusing their attention on the person you support. Circle members use their own diverse range of talents, experience, interests, connections, and time to work with and not for the person. The circle can help the person to advocate for themselves, clarify and pursue a vision, and attain specific goals or aspirations. But most commonly, circles are used to help build friendships and relationships, engage with the community, and get the services they need. The circle is made up of people who believe in the person, understand the person's capacity and potential, and can positively and constructively help them to move their life forward. Circle members may be family, friends, neighbors, support staff, or other people from a person's local community. In this film, Jack Pierpoint adds more detail to the circle of friends concept.
Our term circle of friends is actually not something new. People have been meeting in circles of friendship since the dawn of time, since we gathered around fires in every culture in the world. So this isn't new. We all know how to do it in our gene pool. But in Western cultures, as we have migrated physically, we have lost intergenerational and nurturing networks and how to do that. And so the Circle of Friends is simply an approach that's consciously saying we have to rebuild something that's very fundamental to survival, and you can't do it alone. And so that's where it comes from. It's not new and it's brand new simultaneously, but it's actually in our gene code if we slow down to notice it. One of the dilemmas for support workers in terms of trying to provide a good, solid, safe network of support for people is that typically you're working for several people and you've got a limited amount of time. And so the illusion that you can do it all is A, unreal, and B, just plain dangerous. And these days it's even more dangerous because I think the fundamental instability of modern economics suggests that if a person is totally dependent on a state-funded system to provide everything they've got, it's a very, very scary future. So we need to invert this, and the Circles of Friends and those kinds of mapping approaches begin to expand and remind us about what else is there, because we all have networks of people. Again, no exceptions, none. And what it does is notices who else is in your life. And the minute you begin doing that, you realize that, yeah, there's your physical and your immediate family and immediate friends, and they all have friends and connections. They all have friends. And very quickly, you're wired into a network of often thousands of people with untold, unknown, unnoticed capacities and gifts. And those can be mobilized, but it has to be, in our culture, a pretty conscious effort. So one of the things that's, I think, enormously freeing and exciting for support workers is, rather than try to be the sole support and the only support, the key support for someone, to be a support to build a network, build into the community, strengthen the family. Doesn't mean that you can't be one of those key personal committed supporters, but you're not doing it alone, because that's an impossible, thankless, dangerous assignment. Instead, it's mobilizing community capacity, and that's the key task.
Connections. Most people do not realize the wealth of knowledge, skills, and connections our friends and family have to share. If we extend this to friends of friends and acquaintances, we can imagine the colossal amount of information we have available to us. We all have connections, but often we fail to think of them when we are in the support staff role. We either forget that the individual we support has their own natural networks, or feel that it is inappropriate to inquire about them. However, taking that first step of reaching out to their connections may mean the difference between moving closer to the individual's goal or continuing through a long, drawn-out process that could take months or even years to progress. Take the chance and ask. Natural networks. If you're working with a person who has a particular interest, hobby, activity, or type of employment they would like to try or take part in, natural networks should always be your first point of call. There are several reasons for this, as demonstrated by the film on this page. Using your own natural networks. A lady I used to work with is a good example of how we can use our natural networks. She enjoyed crochet, and as it happened, this was my interest also. We started a crochet club at the group home and invited other people supported by the agency to join. Eventually, we had 3 members who would meet every few weeks. Talking to a friend of mine about this interest, I found out that there was a local crochet club that met once a week. We contacted the group and were welcomed in. Almost immediately, we all had something to talk about and share with the other members of the group, crochet. Friendships were quickly formed, and we all shared materials and patterns. The people I supported now attend the club with no paid support. Getting started. To start the process, ask the individual to invite as many people as they feel comfortable with and whom they know well to a planning meeting. Then start to draw up a chart of their networks and build up layer upon layer of information. For example, if I start with the individual's family friend, I might ask, "What do or did you do for a living?" "I was a bookkeeper." "What are or were your hobbies?" "Crafts, making cards." As they answer the questions, if they look comfortable with this, ask more in-depth questions on the answer. Bookkeeper. How long ago was that? What did it involve? What company was it? Are you still in contact with anyone from there? Making cards. How long have you been doing that? Do you go to a class or do you make them alone in the house? Do you sell them? Where is the class? I then go on and ask them about their sister, brother, aunt, uncle. Networking works. As you go through all the people in the room, this can take quite a while, you build up a huge amount of information. So if, for example, the person you support likes water activities, maybe the brother who is a social worker and sales will have some links or ideas around a sailing activity or windsurfing. People can be involved either directly or indirectly. They can offer to assist you to join in an activity, or they can offer information or put you in touch with someone who will be of more assistance. You should perhaps briefly explain the process you're going to use before you start, and then people are aware that they can get involved as little or as much as they like. There's no pressure. Assure people that the information itself is of great value, and that they do not always need to be physically involved in the link. Watch the video on this page to see an example of how one person's family may hold a range of useful connections.
All right, so we got to skip the next slide because it is in direct conflict with our own internal policies.
But what about boundaries? In our field of work, we have historically been very case study. My first meeting with Chris revealed a very frustrated, lonely, and at times isolated young man. He was the eldest of 2 siblings. His sister had much more freedom in her life than he did, and he felt that, as the oldest son, his parents did not give him the respect, due to his disability, that he felt he should have received. His parents would ask his sister to help him with things he could do perfectly well for himself. They were overprotective and did not realize how upset this made him feel. He was also very lonely and did not have any friends of his own. Any friends he had were also his parents' friends. His frustration led to constant fights and battles with his sister, and more often than not, with his mother. I explained to Chris that the only way forward was to let his family know how he was feeling. Otherwise, nothing would change. He would continue to be frustrated, and his parents would remain oblivious to his anguish. He began to plan, and at an appropriate moment, Chris told his parents how he felt. It was an emotional meeting, but it had very positive results for Chris. His parents had no idea about his loneliness or his feelings with regards to his sister. His parents thought that family was enough, but clearly it wasn't, and they committed to supporting him to realize his potential and dreams. Using his natural networks, we started working towards fulfilling Chris's ambition. The film on this page shows the achievements of Chris and his family. Forming friendships. The number of ways that we can support people to form friendships is endless. Remember, even if a particular hobby or interest cannot be found in the community, you can always help the person to set up their own club or social group. The film on this page introduces just a few more ideas. Building on chance encounters. In this film, Margaret Cushion describes her own experiences of bumping into people she knows from the past and explains how support workers can help the people they are supporting to build on such chance encounters.
Quite often, people with learning disabilities will have, if they're living where they've grown up, they'll have networks of people who know them. But they may not have had the skills or the support to maintain those relationships. Quite often when I'm walking around in my town, I'll see people with learning disability that I've known in the past, that I've worked with in the past, and I'll say hello to them. Now, it's very interesting how the support staff will react to that. Yeah, I know the individual they're with, they don't know me. And what happens? Do they encourage the conversation, support the individual to engage in the conversation and do a little bit of detective work at the same time, finding out about me and who I am and doing their job of keeping the person safe? Or do they close the conversation down politely and move on? There are chance encounters socially that can be legitimate ways of helping people reconnect with people who've known them in the past, build those sorts of connections and take opportunity. Lots of people in a local community who are only too willing to build acquaintanceship, to build friendly engagement with people who live in their neighbourhood. And support workers can enable and support that in the way in which they handle those encounters in the street, in the shop, in their local neighbourhood.
Going outside of your local community. You may need to go out of the local community to join in. This is perfectly acceptable, as some communities are more welcoming than others. It is better to spend more travel money once a month to go to a club or hobby where you feel comfortable and are accepted than to struggle every week to be accepted at a local place. The story we told about Tim, who loves folk music, illustrates this point. Tim lived in an area where his neighbours were wary of him and did not like his minders coming and going to the house. He had tried to be friendly, but things were not as good as they could have been. The music club night is 20 miles away. However, he loves this group, and he has made many friends there. Tim now gets dropped off at the club without support, and the group makes sure he is okay. He also goes on holiday with other members of the group, and he made a friend who happens to be the local vet. Chapter 5. Maintaining Friendships. Introduction. Long-term friendships have a huge impact on our lives. They not only offer us companionship, but they also have a positive effect on our mental health. Studies suggest that having strong social ties is the key to happiness. Other benefits are said to include living longer, boosting our immunity, and reducing the risk of depression. True friends are hard to find, so in order to have a good friend, we need to be a good friend. It takes time and dedication on both sides to keep friendship going. This chapter will explain how you can help people to maintain friendships. To begin, let's look at one of the most important skills of friendships, which is reciprocity, because maintaining a friendship is as important as making one.
People are going to throw things at the screen when I say this, but one of the reasons why people with disabilities have no friends, and I have people come up to me all the time, oh, I work with somebody and he wants to have friends, and we try so often, and we try to get him into all these situations, and he doesn't make any friends, or, oh, I work with somebody and she's so lonely, or my daughter, or my son, and all that kind of stuff. And I know it's cruel, but I have to ask. I said, well, are they likable? Are they likable? Many people with disabilities have difficulty with friendships and relationships because they're not very nice. They're just not very nice. And I think the way that we have parented people with disabilities and the way that we have structured our services has created in people with disabilities a set of negative social skills. Okay, egocentricity. Okay, me first, only me, all about me, what I like, I am the most important person in the room. Human services teaches that to people with disabilities. It teaches people with disabilities that every conversation is about them. Every activity is about what they choose. Everything we do is to make them happy. Okay, and while some of that's, I think, good, I think to a certain extent, we end up with really selfish people. And when we take a look at what is the single most important social skill for the maintenance of human relationships, the single most important social skill, I asked when I do training, I ask audience that question, and you should hear what I get. Oh, communication and respect and loving and eye contact. I don't get that one. People always bring it up, but apparently people think it's really important. So all these other sorts of things, well, it's none of those. Okay, the research tells us, and this is not Dave's opinion, this is research. The single most important social skill for the maintenance of human relationships is reciprocity. I give to you, you give to me. Even in our own families, if we're in relationship with our own families, where we discover we're doing all the giving, they're doing all the taking, we resent it and we don't like them. Do you know what I mean? And people with disabilities are often dreadful at reciprocity, okay? Because it's never been expected of them. And even when they've tried to give it, it's been rejected, okay? Because it's inappropriate, so forth. So one of the things that we did here at Vita Community Living Services, where I work, is we do relationship training with people with disabilities, and that's part of our sex education curriculum and so forth. And then we noticed they're still lonely. You know, now they know all about sex and they know all about shit, but they're still lonely. And then we looked at the fact, well, they're kind of not very nice. They're not very social and so forth. So we started a friendship group. We actually did some research to determine there are 10 likability skills. That if you can learn these skills, you are going to be way more likable as a human being. So we're actually looking at that as teaching people with disabilities the skills, not to, what we typically teach people with disabilities in our relationship is about friendship. What is a friend and what is an acquaintance? What is a stranger? What are all those sorts of things? We don't teach people with disabilities, if you want to be liked, okay, here's what you need to be doing. Okay, some really simple, basic stuff. Because often people with disabilities haven't been in the kind of social relationships when they were very young, where they got to figure those things out. Because even when they were very young, and even when they're mainstream, okay, we say that they're learning social skills in those schools. No, they're learning how to be the exceptional kid in a class of other kids who aren't. So they're usually the recipient of care. Okay, you listen to what parents who have kids are mainstreamed are saying about their kids in mainstreaming. The other kids are so good to my kid. Well, that's lovely, but what about your kid being good to other kids? Do you know what I'm saying? I don't think that we think that far away. We're just really relieved that somebody shows interest in. Okay, well, they're going to show interest in them until they stop. I'm not getting anything back here. You know what I mean? I'm not getting that. So I think that we need to really start looking at people with disabilities as being social creatures. And as social creatures, they need to have a certain set of skills in order for them to make those linkages and to make those things. And, when I talk about this, I get people very, very angry at me. How dare you say they're not likable? Well, firstly, let's make it clear. I'm not saying all of them aren't likable. I'm just saying that when people come to me saying this person is not in relationships, this person doesn't have friendships, a huge percentage of the time, part of the problem is that they're not very likable.
Just think about that one. Kind of interesting.
The 10 skills of likability. The graphic on this page details the 10 skills of likability. Because it is so important, I'm going to touch on reciprocity again in this list. It is number 1, and we are mentioning it several times for a reason. It is considered not nice to state the obvious. However, if you want to have friends and a social life of any kind, you have got to be likable. You've got to throw something into the mix, have something to offer, be the kind of person people like to be around. You have some responsibility here. People, notice I'm not saying people with disabilities, who are not very nice to be around, do not have people wanting to be with them.
Excuse me. So these I will read off to you. So reciprocity, this is the single most important skill for the maintenance of human relationships. Giving to and getting from indicates relationship of equals. Teaching to give of self is hugely important. Sometimes disability puts people in the place of being constant receivers of time and attention. This can create an addiction to being the center of attention. It's lonely at the top, but it's also lonely at the center. Trust, thought to be an emotion, trust is actually a skill. It is an important abuse prevention skill. Knowing whom to trust and how to trust keeps people safe in relationships. Too often, people with disabilities are encouraged to trust everyone indiscriminately. Learning that there are those who manipulate and pretend friendship for personal gain is important. Thoughtfulness. At the core of a good relationship, or I should say at the core of good relationships, is the ability to listen, to take in information, and then act in a manner that demonstrates caring. Like everyone else, people with disabilities can be naturally thoughtful, remembering that you like blue flowers and pointing them out when you go by. This simple act may not be noticed as anything special, but it's really a wonderful moment that needs to be commented on. Approachability. Simply put, don't stink. Good hygiene and attention to grooming are way more important than you might think. Sometimes people with disabilities need a lot of praise and attention for looking and smelling good. Some care providers may feel that this is a behavior that reinforces itself, but it's not. Remember that the people you support usually struggle with informal learning and therefore may not pick up smiles of approval or notice social reinforcement. So tell them. Interest and passions. Small talk comes from big interests. Having something to say is important. Being involved in something gives us interesting things to say. Notice what the person you support is attracted to and encourage hobbies and pastimes. This can develop an interest that may be sustained through a lifetime. It can also develop into interest-specific friends and naturally occurring groups. More than that, people who do things they are interested in are naturally more interesting to talk to than those who do not. Responsibility. Apology is tough, but taking responsibility for things that go wrong is an important relationship skill. The tendency to blame others or to blame disability is a way to shift responsibility from self to some other. Saying I'm sorry for hurt or disappointment is powerful, but the only real apology is change. Apologizing and doing the same thing over and over again is worthless. Assertion. Don't be a doormat. Assertion is involved in decision-making, in negotiation, and even in sharing. Stating a preference means being able to put forward what you want. This skill is only learned in an atmosphere of safety. Teasing for stating preferences can be devastating. When a person is asked what they want to watch on television and then gets a negative response like, oh no, really? You want to watch that kind of crap? They are much less likely to contribute in the future. This can lead to a life of passivity and isolation. Negotiation. Any husband or wife in the world can attest to the fact that negotiation is a complex art. Hear, hear. Friendships are destroyed when negotiation isn't used. The ability to listen and work through decisions means a willingness to be flexible. It's my way or the highway may be a cute slogan, but it makes for a lousy friend. It's important to have opportunities to practice negotiation, sometimes winning, sometimes giving in, sometimes deciding on something else entirely. These outcomes can be exciting rather than distressing. Sharing. So many people with disabilities learn early that the lion's share of attention belongs to them. Since they take longer to learn, they are more often the focus of parental attention than their brothers or sisters. Since they are the subject of meetings where the focus on just them, they can develop an odd kind of egocentricity. If it isn't about me, it isn't worth talking about. Learning to share attention is just as important as learning to share toys. Manners. Sadly, manners are no longer quite fashionable. Even so, please and thank you are still magic words. Knowing how to meet and greet, knowing how to shake hands, chew with a closed mouth are hugely important skills. There are lots of phrases that hint at manners, like gimme, gimme never gets, and take a picture instead of staring, why don't you? There is a certain degree of civility that makes it easier to like someone. And we'll throw in one more just for fun. Everyone finds humor attractive. Spend time laughing, develop a sense of humor over little mishaps. Sometimes we teach people with disabilities that everything is a tragedy. Spilled soup is just spilled soup. It's even funny. Stuff happens. And learning to laugh about it makes everyone less tense and less worried. So if anyone is interested, let me know afterwards. I've actually copied these and put them into an email so that they're all in there separate or whatever. But if you're interested, let me know and I can send it to you.
Your role. The person you support, even if very skilled, will likely rely on your help to keep friendships going. Friendships can be hard work and need continual attention, not just this week or this month, but as an ongoing part of your role. This is why you are paid to be there. This will involve you helping out with the practical aspects of supporting friendship, for instance, remembering a friend's birthday and making sure a card is sent and they call on the day. Good communication is the key, and if it breaks down, the repercussions for the individual can be disastrous. Lack of communication. Tim was the gentleman who had found it difficult to make friends in his hometown. Eventually, he found friendship after he joined the folk club in another community. These people were genuine friends and cared for him in a way that you don't often find. However, several years after these friendships had been established, the group became concerned, as they had not seen him for quite a few weeks. Club members had bought him Christmas presents and were quite worried about his well-being. Some members made inquiries, and it transpired that there had been a change in staff, and the person he shared his apartment with had left. Information about the club had not been written down, and Tim himself could not tell staff the time it started or where it was. He just knew he went on a Tuesday night. His friends' phone numbers had been kept in the file of the person he used to live with. The staff team learned a very valuable lesson from this incident. Now, all the information about Tim and his interests is recorded and updated regularly in Tim's own file to ensure that this situation does not happen again. Additional things we need to consider. Friendship needs continual attention to keep it alive. Both parties need to be responsive. One person cannot carry the whole relationship on their own. Friendship is a two-way partnership. Film on this page details some more ways that we can sustain relationships. It is not exhaustive, but it may give you a few ideas. Your involvement. You need to be always assessing how well a friendship is maturing. Make sure that the relationship is genuinely with the individual and not with you. If you are confident that the friendship is genuine, you can start to withdraw your support, gradually to start with, making sure that both parties are comfortable with this. If things go well, you can progress, but don't withdraw too quickly. For a friendship to be sustainable, it needs to be fun and enjoyable. If it is a chore to meet up, then the friendship is unlikely to last. We all have busy lives, and sometimes making time to meet up can be an issue. In this instance, you could look for ways to meet up that do not take either the person you support or their friend out of their normal routine. For instance, if a friend goes food shopping on a Thursday night, the person you support could meet them in the cafe in the store for coffee before shopping. Things to watch out for. Many people are more than willing to form a friendship, but they do not want to end up in the role of staff person, so be very aware of this. Support workers may still be needed for personal care issues or transport. Make sure that the individual is not making too many demands on the friendship. Remember, the individual might confuse friendship with a relationship. Some individuals might pay a lot of attention to their friend's partner, which could lead to problems and uncomfortable situations. It could even lead to the end of the friendship. People may not have had many friends before and may need emotional as well as physical support to maintain the friendship. You need to be aware of the possible potential for abuse to be present in the relationship. Steps need to be taken to assess the relationship regularly. Keep an eye out for possible barriers. Have a few meetings been cancelled? Has someone been offended? Or has something happened that you don't know about? Take time to get the two friends to talk things through and explore any issues that might be lurking in the background. Help the person you support to look at things from the other person's point of view. Chapter 6. Potential Challenges. Introduction. Supporting people to develop friendships and venture into the community can be quite a challenging task. Many people in society have different views and values about life and how people should or should not live. As a support worker, you will encounter negative and discriminatory attitudes towards the hopes and dreams of the person you support. It is your role to educate people about their rights and to help them advocate for their own rights. This chapter will introduce some of the challenges you and the person you support may face. In this film, Dave Hasbury talks about what to do when things do not go as planned.
One of the greatest challenges that people have, both the individual for whose life it is and the person that's supporting that person, is that showing up while you're learning how to be in a new place. And one of the greatest challenges is how you'll make mistakes when you go out there and you'll try things. And maybe it won't be received in the way that you would want it to be received. One of the greatest challenges for a staff person in that case is, what do they do when things get uncomfortable? That's really probably the biggest challenge, is when somebody's learning how to be in new places, to bring value and find a way to find their place somewhere, but they haven't gotten really good at it yet. You're going to have a lot of uncomfortable moments. And the question is, what do we do with those? And as a staff person, does it cause you to want to pull away? Or does it cause you to be creative in reframing something? Or does it give you the cue that maybe there's something we could learn from this, that maybe we could think about together? And if we don't know, maybe we could invite somebody else to think about that with us. But I think one of the greatest challenges is finding our own comfort level with being in new places while people are learning how to be in a way that's valued. And because when you've spent most of your life being separate from everybody, you don't necessarily know, because you haven't been practicing that. And that's probably the greatest challenge, is how do you deal with uncomfortable stuff when you're in a public place? It takes a lot of courage for a staff person to find the strength inside of themselves to understand what their part in it is and how they can navigate that. So that would be one of the biggest challenges, I think, is the dealing with uncomfortable social situations just because we're learning.
Fear of change. Your role to assist people to lead the life they choose can be met with skepticism, negativity, and prejudice on many different levels. Some people's negativity stems from fear for their loved one and fear of the unknown. Working towards change in attitude can be achieved if small steps are taken one at a time, gradually chipping away at their fears. Change doesn't happen overnight, so don't get disheartened. They have us. Sometimes the benefits of being part of the community are not recognized by people. It is felt that being part of the family is all that anyone could need, and that friendships out of the family circle are unnecessary. Often, an individual struggles to make the family understand how isolated they feel with no friends of their own. Most of us need friends of our own, friends with whom we can share new experiences and thoughts and feelings that we could not dream of sharing with family. Dreams can't come true. Often, family and friends can be quite dismissive of people's dreams due to their disability. We all have dreams of things we would love to try or do. For people with disabilities, it might be necessary to plan a little more creatively in order for them to succeed and to meet their dreams. However, most barriers and obstacles can be overcome, leading us nearer to the dream. In a workshop I ran, I asked people to write down their dreams. Of the 27 people in the room, we managed to make a connection to bring people closer to their dreams for 19 people. One woman wanted to learn sign language. A person in the group was deaf and offered to teach her. A gentleman wanted to learn to play the piano. We had a piano teacher in the group, and so on. My colleague who was running the group taught the boran, a form of drumming, and I had no idea. I have been trying to find a teacher for years. It is all out there in the community. Just ask. Setting people up to fail. At times, people might imply that you are setting people up to fail. In this case, it is essential that you have evidence that the person might want to join an activity and that you plan for as many eventualities as possible in order to achieve the best possible outcome. For example, do a risk assessment with your manager if necessary, and visit the venue on your own first to check things out. To increase your chances of success, do not try to achieve too much too quickly. Once the person has joined something or made a connection, record a video or take photographs of them enjoying themselves, and the evidence will speak for itself. Staying focused. Keeping the person at the center of the planning process can be a constant struggle. Sometimes other people have their own agenda and fail to listen to and focus on the person you support. There are several different ways of dealing with this situation, including the following. Get the group to set ground rules for planning meetings. This includes sticking to the person's agenda. Constantly refer back to the focus person and check things out with them. This gives a clear message that they are in charge. Use body language to make them the center of attention. Position yourself and others facing towards the focus person. If possible, arrange the meeting rooms so that the focus person is at the top of the table and everyone is facing them. When out for a meal, make the focus person the center of attention by sitting them in the middle of any group and not at the end of a row. Get the focus person to video record what they want to say before any meeting so that they don't get flustered or intimidated. Then they get to say what they want. Care must be taken here so that you are not seen to be putting words into the person's mouth. Don't use leading questions, etc. Use phrases like, "What do you think, Mary?" to bring them back into focus. Lack of enthusiasm. Some people might not wish to participate in any aspect of the individual's life, or they may have a negative attitude towards the individual. This is quite a difficult situation to deal with, as you are immediately faced with negativity. In the first instance, try to get people to participate by emphasizing the importance of their input and knowledge. If they do agree to have an input, explain that we are working on positive things first and that we will deal with overcoming barriers later. I have found that this usually works. Continue to remind them of this as you go through the meeting. If people do not wish to participate, you then have to work with other individuals who know the focus person, for example, neighbor or social worker. It is better to work with a few positive people than scores of people with a negative attitude, as this will ultimately have an impact on the person you support. Keeping people safe. We have already learned about the safety that friendships and valued roles within the community can bring, but others, particularly family members, will understandably be concerned about the safety of their loved one. You can recognize how difficult and scary it is for the family member, but you can also help them to think of the benefits for their son or daughter in the future. The family member will be proud that the individual can be independent and can also free up some time for the caretaker. You may find it helpful to let family members see that you and your organization are considering safety, assessing risk, and planning ahead for possible problems, and then they will be more likely to be open to small steps to new adventures. Break the task down into small, achievable steps. Practice social skill building in places where support is present and/or the person is well known. Educate people about their own needs and how this relates to their safety. Help the person to become a powerful self-advocate so they know how to speak up for themselves, get help, and say no. Help the person to have aids, such as a phone with pre-dial numbers and an ID card. Consider other types of assistive technology to make both parties feel more secure and safer, for example, a GPS watch. No vision for the future. Many people struggle with thinking about the future. They have difficulty getting past just going about day-to-day activities, and at times, just filling in time seems okay. We can all fall into the trap of not thinking about the bigger picture, which is having a life with a future, friends, employment, etc. Many people end up doing course after course and never get to use the skills that they have learned, either in the home or in employment. Sometimes the person has no interest in the activities that make up their lives, but it is the only thing that they have been offered. Support staff must be constantly encouraging families to think about the future and to work towards a happy, full, and meaningful life. We have tried everything before. Many families feel that they have tried everything before and have exhausted every avenue already. They feel that nobody has managed to come up with any positive results so far. It is understandable that parents get tired of attending meeting after meeting and not seeing any result. Why should they believe in you? In this instance, you just have to recognize that this might have been the case in the past, but you may have a different approach from the other people involved before. It is often the case that the individual might be in a better place now, and it might just be the right time to make things happen for them. The person may have matured, or circumstances might have changed for the better. Ask to give it a try, even for a short time. Reviewing progress. To conclude, and as you work these challenges, and indeed, as you help people to implement the strategies and approaches for both finding and building community and friendships we have detailed throughout this module, it is also important to occasionally stop, review, and reflect on your progress and what you have learned with the person you support. You may want to do this on your own, or with the support of other people in the person's life. In the film on this page, Dave Hasbury explains how you can apply this concept.
I think a lot of it's actually helping people to learn how to be reflective about, here's what they did. It gets back to that power thing and that responsibility. When I decide to do something, something will happen as a result of that. And the question is what happens something that I want to happen, or is it something that I don't want to happen? And if it's something that I don't want to happen, what do I do so that I can actually learn about that? So part of the skill of that kind of support person who's in a social connection kind of role is really helping people to develop their own kind of reflective learning about, here's what you could do next time. If this is what you want, if this is what you'd like to happen by being a part of the sports bar, what could you do to make that happen? And what it really requires is that we all start to think about, geez, how did we learn how to do that? How did we learn what was okay, what was cool? How do we learn when it's okay to not be cool? How did we learn all of that kind of stuff? And so the one-on-one has a lot to offer in that. But that, I do think, coming back to the circle is, there's no one way to do this. But it's really building in that reflection to kind of say, here's what happened. Here's what I wanted to happen. Here's what happened. What do I learn from that? And what could I do if I wanted that to happen more? And I think that's really a big part. I think it doesn't have to be really abstract. And the closer you do it to the time, not so close that people, if you've had a bad experience, that's really not necessarily the best time to learn immediately, because you're right in the middle of it. But how close to that can be so you can actually remember that, oh yeah, I remember that's what I did at the bar, and this is what happened when I did it, or at the church, or wherever. Helping people to learn from that. And also helping people to learn when it's not their problem, when really prejudice and discrimination does exist, and helping people to recognize the difference between I did something and it caused something to happen, and I was something and it caused something to happen. And those aren't the same thing. And helping people to learn about that. So that's putting it in the context of a really, in a lot of ways, it's the kind of paradox of a welcoming world and an unjust world. And there's learning to happen in both those ways. So.
Reviewing your responsibilities. What follows is a comprehensive review of your responsibilities to the person you support, as highlighted within this module. It is your responsibility to respect and account for the prejudice, discrimination, and institutionalization that people have faced and still often face. Make sure you do not make assumptions about what friendships and community should mean for people. Help people to build meaningful relationships with others. Help people to share their gifts with and contribute to the community. Move beyond the bubble of services. Maximize the use of natural, unpaid relationships. Bring as much of yourself and your own knowledge, skills, and connections as you are comfortable with. Help people to maintain the friendships they have built. Be alert to people's rights and counter their potential challenges. Help people to review, reflect on, and build their social skills.
All right. So let's see.